Maoist rebels in Nepal had just launched their armed struggle to bring down the Nepalese monarchy. But suddenly, this wasn't someone else's war anymore. It was happening in my own country, among my own people. My own people were killing each other. Nepal's war has been over now for nearly 5 years, and the images form a part of the healing process so that journalism can help in reconciliation as well. The faces you see there, faces of bereavement and pain and the tears, could be anywhere in the world. So the images of suffering are universal, and it reminds us of the humanity that we all share. It'll probably not surprise you that there are people who argue against portraying the pain of war. They say looking at a war only from the standpoint of victimhood helps perpetuate the status quo and works against social reform. Some of them just leapt out, and you said, this is it. Like the picture of the woman gorilla, clasping this automatic rifle. She's draped in a shawl. It's obviously very cold outside. It's misty. I mean, it's almost Da Vinci-esque, the photograph. Just technically perfect. It's taken by a professional photographer. But also you can see the war fatigue in her eyes and her face. And then, of course, the most dramatic thing about that picture is that when we went back to try to find her, it took us 6 months to find her. Investigative journalism. We tracked her down to Maoist camp. And there she is. And it turns out, and this is what the photographer hadn't found out about her when he took the picture, it turns out that during the war, throughout the war, she was in the Maoist army and her brother was in the National Army. So the two were actually fighting each other. That it was not just a civil war, but a sibling war. And there were many other cases like that. No, I think the primary audience for this are Nepali people who went through the war. I think it's been a useful case study for other conflict areas, to see how journalism and maybe specifically photojournalism fits in the whole reconciliation and healing process and how it helps. And I think it's, from our experience, it's been a good example of healing reducing the sense of revenge or the sense of violence after a war, to moderate things, because people see that everyone suffered. It is not just one side or the other side. Obviously, you need to combine. That's what a photo feature means. You combine a photograph with a text. But definitely, what I learned from this is the power of photographs. I'm not a professional photographer myself. I'm just an editor who uses pictures. But it showed that with the minimum training you can have fantastic photojournalists who can augment the message in their story with pictures, which at the moment our journalists don't do because they just don't have training, and they're basically text-based. So these are works of Nepali photographers who seem to have immense talent, or even non-photographers who with a little bit of training can do great pictures.
So there's a future in young journalists having some basic photography skills?
Yeah, I think journalists today, like you, I think you need to be a multimedia. You need to be versatile with all the medium. And because the medium through which you get it out is the internet, which can use all the mediums. So it's text, it's pictures, it's video, combination of all three, graphics. So yeah, I think the training, the technical part of the training has to be multimedia. But of course, the most important thing, much more than training and the technical side, is the content. What are you trying to say? Those are just the tools. What is your message? What do you want to get across? And then I think as a communicator, your versatility with that medium, of course, determines whether or not you can get it across.
Okay. And was it difficult as an editor during the war what to include for fear of
No, I know.
your own safety?
Surprisingly enough, the war was not that difficult to cover. I mean, you just needed a little bit of, you need to take a little bit of risk. You had to get off your butt, get out there in the hinterland, and that was difficult. It's difficult even in peacetime. Nepal is very rugged and mountainous, so it's difficult even otherwise. It just was even more difficult because of the conflict. But surprisingly, it was after the war that things got really dicey for editors and reporters, well, because of the, war unleashes this violence, which is difficult, which doesn't end with the end of the war. It carries on. And the lawlessness and the lack of, and the impunity that follows war means that violent groups, mafias, really proliferate. You can see this happening in Russia after the Soviet collapse. So all countries go through this, and the transition period is particularly dangerous for journalists.
And what's the media like now as a...
Oh, we're the freest press in the world. But the trouble is we're not using that freedom. We're either self-censoring because of the fear, or lack of training. But overall, I think Nepal's media has really grown and matured. I think, and this exercise has been very useful for our photographers and other journalists to see that, this is how you take pictures. You have to look at all captions. You have to collect all the information about the pictures you're taking. You can't just take a picture. That's not the end of the story. You have to go try to find out as much as possible. And then there's always this really nice way to look at the passage of time by going to the same people you photographed 10 years later and then taking a picture of them and see how their lives have turned out. It always tells a really good story, and that's what we've done.